Hey, what's up there, youth pastors? Paul Turner here from the discipleproject.net, here with another video for you today. Today, I get to share with you an opportunity that I had to be on another podcast. That would be the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with Brent Aiken. And this conversation is all about being organized, how to organize yourself, something that I am a huge proponent of because I believe that disorganized youth ministries are less successful than organized youth ministries. And because of that, I talk a lot about that in this conversation, and so hopefully it will benefit you. But if you're brand new here to the channel, thank you so much for visiting. Thank you for being a part today. Be sure to go and click that subscribe button down there, and you'll get videos like this in your inbox on a regular basis. Now, listen, before we jump into this, let you know, the interview is about 40 minutes long. I'm going to put a link down below to the audio. If you want to listen to this on a drive or something like that, well, I'll put a link down to the actual audio podcast that you can listen to. But if you're interested, I am going to be breaking this up over the weekend. So you're going to see some pieces and parts come out over the weekend that are focused around individual questions that I'm answering within the podcast. So if you're not into a 40-minute conversation, totally understand. But I will have some shorter clips coming out over the weekend. But if you are interested in my podcast, which is the Youth Ministry in Motion podcast, or Brent's podcast, which is a great podcast as well, the Student Ministry Conversations podcast, both of those links will be down in the show notes below. But that being said, let's jump into the interview.
That is not why we're here today. And so as our listeners know, we typically ask our guests to come up with the topic themselves. That way it is much more geared towards them and not towards us. And your topic that you chose for today was how to be organized or to be more organized in youth ministry. And obviously, if you've been in the game for a while, I think a lot of veteran youth pastors see the need and the necessity of being organized and being structured and being planned. But sometimes it can be overlooked when you're younger in youth ministries. So for everybody listening to this, we can look, though, and kind of see that in our world today, organization is important. It's all over. There's shows about it. There's 150 how-to articles on the internet at any given moment. But why is it important in student ministry?
Wow, well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I would start off by saying that being organized is a skill. It is something that you have to work on. You have to figure out being organized in your life, because if you think it's just going to happen, I mean, I don't see organized as a spiritual gift. So if you're waiting for this magnificent gift of the Holy Spirit of organization, I don't read that in Scripture, but it's something certainly you can work on. Now, I would say that you as a youth pastor are working with people who are on schedules. You have parents that have schedules. You have students that are on schedules. You have church people in your congregation that work on schedules. Your pastor works on schedules, and an unorganized environment. If you put an unorganized person in an organized environment, my guess is that you don't last very long because you cannot keep up with the standards that are around you, and quickly you become the person why a meeting doesn't start on time, or why this activity doesn't happen, or those things. Because if you're not organized and you're not making it a part of your DNA and part of your work life, well, then, like I said, you're going to be kind of found out that you're not very good at that. But I would also say that an organized youth ministry has a greater chance of being successful than a disorganized youth ministry. I don't see a lot of articles on youth ministry as how I won the day by being disorganized. You know, there's not a lot of youth ministries that can tout, let me tell you why watching 10 hours of Netflix a day really advanced the cause of the kingdom. You know, there's no great episodes on that, and I don't think there will be. And the last thing is, why is this important to this, is because disorganization hurts your credibility. If you are a disorganized person, you are more than likely not given more responsibility, and even the work that you are doing cannot be trusted because you're not coming through. You may have there's great ideas, and then there's poor execution. Ideas are nothing. Execution is everything. Nobody cares about your ideas. Everybody cares about how you're going to carry out what you said you were going to carry out.
Well, no, I totally agree with that. And I think one of the big things with that is I always equate it back to the ideas in the shower. Everybody has great ideas in the shower, but only about 2% of them ever come to fruition. And a part of that's execution. And so being able to have a plan and then work that plan all the way through execution is organization, 100%. And so that's very, very good explanation on why that is important. But obviously when we get into just the conversation of organization and like in the scope of youth ministry as a whole, youth ministry is a cog with a wheel with a lot of moving parts. And there are a lot of things that happen, a lot of things that are going seasonally, some that are going year round. But so what are some specific things in ministry that will be more efficient as you learn to be more organized?
Well, I think it affects everything. And once again, I want to also point out that I wasn't born organized. Okay. This is, nobody is born organized per se. Nobody is, learning how to do certain things at very young ages. And your personality may dictate some of that. But as a skill, it's something we're always learning. It's something that I had to learn. If you looked at me as a younger youth pastor, you would clearly tell that I was disorganized, that somehow I didn't put A and B together, or I only thought that my ideas counted, or I thought my schedule was the only one that counted. And so I want people that are listening and watching to know that this is something I've learned over time, and how it impacts the rest of youth ministry is the fact that you operate on monthly or quarterly. There's some people who plan events monthly, or they're general in their youth meetings. I mean, you have to organize your teaching calendar. You have to organize your preaching calendar. You have to organize your Sunday school class. You have to decide whether you're going to use A curriculum or B curriculum. And that has to be put in at a certain time for you to be able to get that back at a certain time. Your camps, that's a critical area. If your camp is not organized, if you don't have your van rented, if you're planning your own camp and you don't have facilities rented, if you don't have your guest speaker booked, things like trips. Like I said, if you're renting a bus, if you don't have a certain amount of adult volunteers that you need to have for that event. And also, I think really critical is being organized in things like the bigger paradigms like discipleship. How does discipleship work? How is that organized? How is that put into a process that makes sense to whether you're doing a retreat at the beginning of the year, or it's an ongoing one-to-one, or or even if you just slot into your organizational chart where you're going to be experimenting with things. Everything doesn't have to be permanent. Some things can be experimental, but that is also organized. You can't just immediately announce. The worst thing I ever did to my adult volunteers, and God bless them if they should ever listen to this, I am sorry for last minute decisions that I just made, that I did not prep you for, right? That I should have prepped you weeks in advance, maybe even months in advance. But because this young brain had an idea, I thought it would be good to do that without actually checking with people. So I want to be able to say that that being organized impacts every area of your youth ministry. It impacts everything from you being on time for your staff meetings to you making sure that your adult volunteers know when your meetings are, when you are having a meeting. And so whether it's a Zoom meeting, whether it's a 10-minute call, whatever those things are, all that results on the youth leader having the cognizance of saying that has to make it on the calendar, in my phone, on a Post-it note, wherever that needs to be. All of those organizational factors have to go into that. And of course, that's scalable. In the youth ministry I'm in now, if I have a dozen kids where only X amount of parents go, to church there, and I have other kids that are there whose parents don't attend church, then I have to work a little bit hard to get in touch with those parents for certain activities and things of that nature. But if you have a large ministry, and I would say large these days is maybe 50 and above, where you have to, that size will dictate the level of organization that you need to be in. Not that you can't be organized with a dozen kids, you still have to be organized. I still have to figure out, like I'm taking kids on a retreat this weekend. I have to make sure that we don't have a church band. So I have to say, well, okay, we're going to meet at the gas station, right? I have to let everybody know we're meeting at the gas station because it's local, right? As I said, all right, meet me at the gas station. I'll pick you guys up there and then we'll head out. Or if I have a student who lives further away, I have to, like I talked with a parent last night and said, hey, do you need me to pick them up on the way, or do you need me to, or are you going to drive them to the camp? Are students driving their own vehicles, or are you picking them up? There's all those little factors that sometimes parents don't even know what their child is doing. And so you have to be organized, even if you have 12 kids or you have 50 kids or you have 100 kids. It's all scalable, and all the tools that we talk about, you just have to scale it to the degree that you are required to. That is going to help your youth ministry flow to the best of its ability.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the thing is like you said, it kind of has to be an organization at all levels. You can't really do a one and done kind of mindset when it comes to this. But for the youth pastor that's maybe like, all right, no, I can see this as a flaw of mine. I can see this as maybe a hindrance that's currently a part of me, or maybe yeah, now that you're speaking on this, I have had like a bunch of parents and my pastor kind of getting on to me for not being organized. Where would you recommend that they start as far as like hey, hit the ground running with these 3 things to get organized?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, they have to check their own habits, right? If anything is going to limit you from being organized, is going to be your own bad habits. And do your own inventory. Am I late to meetings? Why am I late to meetings? Do I feel like I have to stop and get Starbucks on the way to the meeting? Do I have to finish whatever it is I'm doing? Whether it's like, this was bad for me. I used to have to like back in the day when you couldn't DVR things, right? When you couldn't record things, or they weren't streaming, you had to watch it in the moment. You had to well, listen, I got to watch this. This is like, an end of a show or whatever it is. Like, I got to watch this because it's not coming back on. Or you have to rent it on, DVD or whatever you have to do. And I said, well, I have to then internally look at my own habits. What is causing me to be late? What is, there's a certain sense of narcissism too that you have to look at that says, well, this meeting is going to start when I get there. I mean, you have to then reel that in and say, well, are you simply just focused on yourself and that everybody else can wait for you? So I think it's a matter of inventory, first of all, is to make sure that you are taking care of your own personal habits, whether it's your streaming habits, your watching habits, or whether it's how you organize your time at home. But call out those bad habits, write them down and say, look, these are bad habits of mine and I have to do this. And then I would put, what are the consequences of these habits? What is it causing me? How much trouble is it causing me? And usually we don't change anything unless there's a pain point, unless there's an opportunity where we say, this behavior hurts me. It's hurting me professionally. It's hurting me personally. It's hurting me in my character, maybe because people don't see me as trustworthy to handle an assignment. Whatever that is, I think you have to first start with that. The next thing I would say is, if you're wanting to be organized, you want to be able to try a lot of things, right? There's all kinds of tools out there that you can use. What tool best works for you? Now, I've tried everything. I've tried everything from, having huge marker wall calendars on the quarter, right? No lie, I used at one point had 4 calendars. I had the calendar, my planner, I had the wall calendar, I had the church calendar, and then I had like a calendar at home. So every time I wrote something down, I wrote it down 4 times. Now, I'm not saying that's what you should do, because I think that's a bit overboard. And I had to say, okay, I got to focus and kind of bring everything in here. Otherwise I may miss something. But try everything for your own sake. Try, like I've done Post-it notes on the wall. I've done just writing things down and do that. But for anybody that wants to start getting organized, try digital, right? Try apps like Calendly or Monday or, your own, or Google Calendar, or something that is accessible everywhere that you can say, oh, I can just tap into that and get a hold of that. Try a pad and paper. If you find it best to use dead wood, man, that's great. Go ahead and find a planner to do that for you, or just a yellow pad and say, this is Monday, I'm going to write all these things down. If it's visuals, if you do need visuals, if you need some sort of visual element with that, well, then go ahead and use Post-it notes or use different things that are going to click with you visually to remind you that these things are happening. Also try audio. If you want to record, and most phones have a memo app on there where you can do an audio memo. If you need to record your day and then listen to it back, well, go ahead and do that. That's an easy way to try as well. I think it's a matter of trying a lot of things and finding out what is going to work for you. But if you don't check those things, if you're bad at it, if you need to send yourself email reminders, probably the best thing that I have here, at least on my phone, is reminders, right? I just have reminders. I just set myself, and I'll just say, hey, I have a podcast at 10 a.m. Please remind me at 9:30. And so when I record that, and when I have that, and it reminds me, sometimes I'll put 2 or 3 multiple reminders a day. I want to be reminded an hour before, 30 minutes before, and 15 minutes before. Now that you say, well, that's overdoing it. Well, I say, well, if you're disorganized, I don't think you can have enough tripwires, if you will, in place. They're going to remind you of the things that you need to have. So whether that's putting up, your Post-it notes in your bathroom, where you're going to most likely see these visual signs that you need to get things done, or whether it's sending yourself or having digital capabilities, they're gonna you set an alarm for those things. And like I set alarms on my phone all the time. It says, you need to stop doing this at this time. You need to start doing this at this time. A reminder to go to the grocery store and say, I got to go pick up milk. And those are, those, like I said, it seems like I'm a crazy person to do that, but I value my time. And I think most youth pastors who are busy value their time. And if you value your time, then being overly organized is a good thing, because you're going to wind up saving your time in ways that you didn't even think. Would you rather, ask yourself this, would you rather have 3 reminders to book the van at a certain time? Or would you rather explain to parents why now you're asking all the parents, as many parents as can, to drive you to camp? So so when you start figuring out that failure is not great, you'll start to remind yourself, because you don't like that feeling of disorganization and of failure, that you'll try multiple things to get there, to be as organized as you can be.
All listening to kind of all what you just said there, it kind of makes me think back to just the mindset of kind of the underlying feature in everything that you just said was discipline. And what being personal discipline. So how does disciplining yourself and disciplining your own habits fall into organization?
Well, discipline is the core word of discipleship. In order to be a disciple, you have to have some sort of discipline. There are things that Jesus taught, right, about prayer. I always point to the upper room where they had the Last Supper. Well, somebody had to book that room. One of the disciples had to go do that. Somebody had to make sure the bread was there. Somebody had to make sure the wine was there. But you know what? There was one element missing. Somebody forgot to get the foot washer, right? Somebody dropped that job. I don't know who that was. I'm going to say Judas. It was his job, and I'll say he forgot it for whatever reason. But then that created an opportunity for Jesus to say, okay, I'm going to wash the feet of disciples. But if you look at all the steps that were required for that moment to happen, they didn't happen by themselves. Jesus didn't just do a miracle and says, well, all these things are suddenly going to appear. Everybody had to do a part to make that happen. And so when something doesn't happen, you have to be disciplined enough to say, okay, I have to think this through top to bottom. And what I say is start with the end in mind, right? Everything is planned with the end in mind. That whatever you're planning, if the experience you want to have, and that doesn't matter whether it's a youth meeting, a camp, a retreat, a service, whatever it is you're planning, has to start with, what is the end result? What is it I'm trying to get out of this? And then you have to work through that list that gets you there. Because if you're not working through the list and by the way, this is a terrible planning strategy. If you're just crossing your fingers that everything's going to go okay, that's not a great strategy. You have to actually do the work and plan it in your head, because then you have to think, if you're planning a service, you have to say, okay, what if X happens? And what if Y happens? And you have to think, well, what if I run out of time? What if you have to go through some what if scenarios to make sure that you have contingency plans. My contingency plans have contingency plans. Okay. So I have just learned that if you've done anything in youth ministry, nothing goes the way it's supposed to go. What if the technology fails? What if you're at camp and the visual goes out and that really cool video you wanted to show doesn't work? What is your backup for that? And one of the things that I made sure in youth ministry that I did was every piece of media was tested before I went up, from the PowerPoint to the video, because I've been in those situations where you assume something's going to work. And if you assume that it's going to work, the chances are it is probably not going to work. You have to test those. So there are certain, like you said, I think that's so key, that there has to be a certain discipline to it, where you say, okay, test the media. Are my notes ready? Are my slides good? Whatever that is, whatever you're preparing for, you then go to the end and say, this is what I want it to look like. I want to be organized. I want to be on point. I want to be able to have all these things in a row. What then does get me there? What are all the things? And what are the things that are going to prevent me from getting there? What is going to be a tripwire for me that's going to blow this whole thing up that I did not think about? And you have to be able to work through those processes and have a sense of personal discipline in that to make sure that things go well. And there's going to be some things that you can't even plan for. There's ridiculous things you can't plan for everything, but you can plan knowing the kinds of students you have, who's going to take over a meeting, who's going to, or an adult leader. It's like they're prone to forget something or whatever it is, that you may have to send that youth leader triple reminders, because they need triple reminders. So that's the point there, is that there has to be a certain sense of discipline for yourself, because you know the kinds of outcomes that you want to have.
Yeah. And I loved your conversations about having contingency plans on contingency plans and everything like that. And I think one of the common things that that I hear, especially with younger youth pastors, and I mean, I definitely been guilty of this in the past as well, is they're just like, oh, well, it's okay, because I think I'm good at thinking on my feet. What's the difference between thinking on your feet and being unorganized?
Well, thinking on your feet is okay when something happens. The problem is that thinking on your feet does not necessarily get you to the goals. In other words, when you're thinking on your feet, you're adapting to a situation. The question is, can you keep your end goal in mind, or is the end goal changing? And if your end goal changes, well, then you have to you adapt on the fly. If you planned an event for 20 kids and 2 shows up, what's your plan? Right? See, you either have a plan or your kids have a plan, right? It's simple as that. If you're thinking, I'm just going to do this. Yeah, but what if you don't have the numbers? What if everybody doesn't show up for that? What's your contingency plan? And if you say, oh no, they'll show up, well, I would say that's presumption. And presumption is a bad place to be if you think when you plan an event for 100 and 20 show up. You've already then you've said, I've paid too much for food. I paid too much for this thing. I'm over budget, all those things. And you have to be able to say, thinking on your feet is one thing, but I think that's the anomaly. I think everybody needs to think on their feet. If you're in youth ministry and you're not thinking on your feet all the time, you need to take an improv class because you're going to have to do that. But when it comes to plans and outcomes, when you want a certain outcome, then I think that requires planning. Everybody needs to think on their feet, though.
Yeah. And I just think there's a dangerous parallel, or a dangerous unintended correlation between people that say that they're just good at thinking on their feet and the ones that really don't have a plan at all and are just kind of winging it as they go. And in the grand scheme of things, like you said, if you're winging it, you're not going to hit your end goal. Your end goal is going to change.
Yeah. And do you know who doesn't care about whether or not you think good on your feet or not? Your pastor. Do you know who doesn't care whether you're good at thinking on your feet? Your parents. Do you know who else is not great or thrilled that you can think on your feet? Your students, right? They're fine. That's an ability and a skill you can have. But thinking on your feet only gets you so far. Plans, being organized, shows a process. It shows that you're goal oriented. It shows that this thing is going somewhere. You can show up to a meeting and not plan, and simply have a youth meeting. But the problem is that when you're asked about where the youth ministry is going or where is this heading, this is not a good answer. Okay. Shrugging your shoulders and doing this, well, I'll think on my feet. That's not a great answer in a staff meeting. Well, I think great on my feet, it doesn't matter. And that's, prone to get you in trouble. I would not count on that as a reliable skill.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I like I said, I mean, I think organization is it's a big part. You have to have a plan in order to make things happen. And the thing is you can adapt that plan, like you said, you can change it, you can modify it, you can ratify it, whatever you need to do. But the thing is there still has to be some groundwork of, hey, this is the idea, this is where we're going, this is my end goal. And great stuff as far as that goes. But obviously, as far as this goes, there's not a carbon copy organizational practice that works for everybody. I mean, we all can't work on Evernote. That can't be the opportunity for organization for everybody. Google Calendar is not going to work for everybody, but at the same time, having the daily planner, pen and paper doesn't work for everybody as well. So how do you go about finding methods and practices that work for you?
Well, I would say you need to first of all, you talk to the people that are closest to you, right? They will be honest with you. They will tell you what you need. Ask the question, what do I need to be more organized? And I think you have to listen to the people around you, and you have to be willing to take a certain element of criticism and a certain element of direction. So when you ask your pastor, what will help me? Or ask people, what helps you be more organized? And I think when you collect the data, right? In addition to what I said earlier about try everything that works for you. Maybe you're a visual learner, maybe you're an audio learner, maybe you need to have a combination of 2 or 3 of those things. But I think you also need to have the ability to listen to feedback. Ask people, what makes you the most organized? Ask people in your church who are business people, who run companies, who whether they're big companies or just small companies. Find the most organized person in your church and pick their brain and says, hey, what keeps you on point? Look, you have payroll, you have to do schedules. Even if it's the person who manages the your local pizza place, they have to have employees, they have to have work schedules, they have to have those things. What really keeps you on board with keeping all your tasks? Or ask moms, ask dads, just ask people. And I think there's a stigma with ministry in general, if you're a leader in ministry, that the stigma is that you know everything, that you have everything together. And I think that has to be done away with. I think that has to be buried, because if you come in with humility, and because if you say, look, I don't know everything, what do you use? What is your skill? Ask other youth pastors in your area. What keeps you disciplined? How do you discipline yourself? What organizational tools that you use? And I think the key to finding what is right for you is all of those things. Try everything, get advice, be humble to not knowing everything, and simply weighing those against your own personality, weighing those against your habits, weighing those against some other things. But you eventually, I would say this, you eventually have to choose. You have to try something for 30 days, try something else for another 30 days, but weigh that against that the expectations are not going to stop, right? Your pastor still has expectations. Your experimenting does not stop the fact that you have to execute on the things that you're supposed to execute on. So I would say, ask of people, say, look, I'm not really good at this. Can you help me? What do you recommend? Start with basic things and then kind of work your way out from there of whatever's going to work best for you. And then also do an inventory of what really needs organization, right? How is your communication with parents? How is your communication with your adult leaders? How is your communication with students? What is it that needs the most organization in your ministry, and what needs the least amount of organization? What requires, a post on Instagram, and what requires you to do a 4-week buildup, right? If you're doing a change in ministry or a paradigm shift, well, guess what? That's going to require a whole lot more preparation and organization than, hey, I'll be at McDonald's tonight. See you there at 4 o'clock. as you're putting out on Instagram, whoever wants to come can come. So, everything is not right for everybody, but you still have to investigate and experiment and try all the things that are going to work for you. But eventually you're going to need to settle on something, because all the experimenting will do is the goal of experimentation is to find out what is best for you. Choose something and then run with that.
No, I definitely agree. And I would add two things to that. First off, when you get to a point to where you find something that works, don't just believe that it's going to be the best thing ever and work with it for the rest of your life. Even if you find something organizational that works for you, I would still recommend and encourage you to try new things, because there might be something out there that works even better for you. And then the other half of that is, when you go out and do your organization, you have to be aware of your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes when you have to plan things, you're going to plan things that you're going to be like, I don't know anything about this. It's okay to ask for help, because when you ask for help, not only are you building relationships by bringing someone in and asking for their input, which automatically is going to build trust with that person because you're asking for their input, but then also it's probably going to turn out to be a better event because you're trying to pull other people, you're pulling in other resources, other opportunities, and more experience and wisdom to make that thing that you're planning work even better. Whether that be organizing a Wednesday night, organizing a church camp, organizing a mission trip, whatever. Make sure that you involve other people, and really work on finding the people that have skill sets in your area, whether it be an organization or a church or anything. Find people in your area that don't have the same skill sets as you, because it's super important to have that.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, if you're in a meeting, you don't have to, you can run the meeting, but make sure you have a note taker. Make sure you have somebody who is going to remind you of things you said. If you have a youth meeting, go ahead and have a student who assists you. It's not necessarily about how much more. You don't have to have a team of 20, but if you have the right size team for you, then the more people that are involved are going to see your blind spots. Say, hey, did you think about this? Have you thought about that? And you're going to get, like you said, other opinions in there. So yeah, don't try to organize by yourself. Have a team of people, regardless of what it is, that you have 3 or 4 people that are involved in the organization of the event, so that there can be delegation, so that there can be ideas that you didn't even think of, so that blind spots can come out, so that people who have gifts to use that you didn't even know existed could then present their gifts to be used in that element or in that event. And so, yeah, absolutely. Don't plan alone. The accountability factor is huge there.
Yeah. The number of times that I have gone and stopped myself from doing an event because I asked someone else and they were like, that is stupid. Don't do that. I mean, so many times that it has saved my skin on something that was either poorly planned or something that would not have gone over well with the kids, or something that the parents would have seen and been like, that's not safe, or something to that nature. Have those extra voices and sounding boards where you can bounce stuff off.
I think we've seen this in youth ministry before, where a bad idea goes awry. There was not enough people in the lineup that didn't check down on this. There was not enough people to say that was a bad idea. Probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so as we're kind of moving on and kind of closing out this conversation, do you have any recommendations on resources that can help someone that's trying to get more organized in youth ministry?
Sure. Yeah, there's plenty of things you can use. There are plenty of planners on the market, and it doesn't matter whether you use a notebook or whether you use a specific planner, those kind of things. The problem with planners, though, and even empty notebooks, is they actually don't tell you what to plan. And there's very few of them that are directed towards youth pastors that understand and know the needs of youth pastors. So what does a youth pastor need to know versus a parent? Or what does a youth pastor need to know versus somebody in business, or those things? And I would say, the resources that are out there, like I said, if you're just a plain notebook person that you need to take notes and write a date at the top and all that, perfectly okay. If you say, well, I need something more, well, then you can investigate. Go look on the App Store and just look under organization or organize or meetings or things of that nature. I mean, there's things like Slack, but Slack doesn't work for everybody. There's Discord, which is great for audio or text or video for that matter. So if you want to do Discord, and as generations get younger, the older, and this is a slight on my generation, the older generations are less likely to adapt to new technology. They would rather you, right now, they're just fine if you text them, right? Send me a text, send me an email. And sometimes emails don't even get open. But the younger generations, as you get younger, I think you need to explore new technology, whether that's Discord, whether that's new apps on there and things like that you can be able to look for. But if you want to find something that's very specific towards youth ministry, I did write a resource, and I initially started this resource for myself, what do I need to keep myself organized? And so I wound up putting together what I call my youth ministry playbook, because the difference is that a planner, like I said, doesn't help you plan. You have to come with all the planning. And if you don't have the skill set for that yet, what the youth ministry playbook does, it gives you a playbook. It gives you everything from the calendar month to the things that I think are important. Like example, my monthly to-do has 6 things on there that I make sure that I have little lines there that are there. And you can print this off, put it in a binder. Once again, I love dead paper. I love a physical object that I need to carry around with me because it becomes a visual reminder, because they say out of sight, out of mind. But I like the visual reminder. So the things that it reminds me to do, like example, new students to follow up with. I can make a list of new names. I had a young man last night that I want to follow up with. You have an event to-do list. Most youth ministries have at least maybe one event per month or at least one event per quarter. So then there's a little note there where it's, hey, look, there's your 4 slots to be able to do that. Touch base with my pastor about, there's sometimes youth pastors don't think about, I got to touch base with my pastor on this. Is there a change? Is there a problem? Is there a challenge? Is there a concern? And when we don't touch base with our pastor about things, well, bad things can happen. What do my leaders need to know? And these can be student leaders, they can be adult leaders. What do my leaders need to know? Because that, once again, reminds me that I need to be in touch with them. What do my parents need to know? That's critical. If my parents don't know what's going on, that's just going to bring trouble back on me. The earlier that I can show them what's happening, whether it's a calendar, a camp, a retreat, you can't bust that on a parent a month before. It has to be 3 months before, 4 months before. If you're doing an outreach, you can't say 1 week we're doing this and next week we have this huge outreach that we're going to do. You really got to prep people for that. And that's your parents and your leaders need to know those things. And then the last thing is student leaders to invest in. Sometimes we get we get these blinders on. And I used to call it, when you talk about planning by yourself, I call it locking yourself in the lab. That we all are these mad scientist youth pastors that we're in here, clacking away, and we have beakers and Bunsen burners, and we're mixing up the next greatest thing. And we think that's it. We've had no feedback. We've had nobody in on it. We're just locked in the lab. And we don't execute well on that. We just think it's a great idea. When somebody says, that's a terrible idea, we're deflated. So you have to then find, student leaders to invest in, because you need to remind yourself that you don't do things alone. You need parents, you need adult volunteers, you need your pastor, you need other students. And when you have those physical reminders with you, that's clearly a way that you process that month to month. And how I organize it is just by month, every month, you're going to get a to-do list with that list on there. You also get a weekly planner, and you can make as many copies of these as you want, right? It comes as a little bundle with not only the playbook with all the organization tools I'm talking about, but it also comes with about a dozen articles. It comes with checklists. It comes with things that I go through that I have to write for myself. So I make sure that I write it for other people. So yeah, you have a weekly planner. You have an event planner, right? In the event planner, it asks you, what are your ideas? Well, what will I ask adults to do? What will I ask students to do? And what am I responsible for? Then it gives you little event budgets, right? You can make as many copies as you want. Things like food or marketing or prizes or supplies or things that you might need for that. Then you have your event budget, but then you have your monthly budgets. What are you spending per month? If you don't know what you're spending, well, you don't know if you're not allocating your funds correctly. And then at the end of the month, at the end of the month, I give you a month in review page. What worked, what didn't, where did I grow, and what do I need to learn? Because I think that's all part of a youth pastor's process, especially if you're a new youth pastor. If you're a new youth pastor, you know what, when you graduated college and you got hired, that's the day everybody said, oh, great, we have the answer to all our problems. And now all eyes are upon you to solve problems, to get this youth ministry back on track, or to get it off the ground. And, you know, not being organized. And listen, I want to point this out too, that this is not, organization is not a substitute for prayer, reading scripture, your own personal spiritual disciplines. That is to be, to me, that is to be the basis. That's the foundation of everything. I can't plan. I shouldn't have to. I'm not planning for you to say, well, I should pray every day. If you're not praying every day, it doesn't matter how well organized you're going to be because you're not in tune with what's going on. It's not to, you're not organizing the Holy Spirit out of your life. You're creating boundaries. Organization, all that is boundaries to help you focus, to allow the process of whatever the Lord's put on your heart for your youth ministry. Disorganization sends you everywhere, but organization gives you those boundaries. Like bowling, there are 2 gutters on either side, and you know where you're supposed to, you know, throw the ball. And that's all organization is. And so if people are looking for a tool like that, they're welcome to check out my resources or other people's resources. But organization is a critical, I believe, a critical part to making sure that your youth ministry can function and achieve the goals and dreams that God's put in your heart for that ministry.